by a small business. We are leaving that strictly up to the Small Business Association or administration. They have listed categories of small businesses, and those businesses are granted particular status based on the type of category they have and the size they are. Unless they are listed, they will not be able to go and get credit for it. All of the clauses that we have refer back to those lists from the Small Business Administration. Now, our requirement only goes to the total category small business. We have had numerous discussions, and the DOE corporate clause actually goes and lists a breakdown of the small business category into several subcategories. DOE, for example, has goals for contracting to each of those subcategories, but as long as our contractor meets the overall small business category, we're going to call that good. One of the issues is how many local HUD zone businesses are there within this geographical area? Is it really the intent to have a small business from Atlanta or Washington, D.C. or New York or Los Angeles come work out here, and should our contractor have to go chase them to do work that they may not be qualified for just to meet a subcategory goal? And we said no. So let's make the threshold small business, and it goes back to the SBA.
Is that okay? Stephen, your questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is, small businesses, my understanding, can be quite large, like several hundred employees. So
yes,
we're not just talking about little 5 or 10 person operations.
Correct.
These could be relatively large businesses for this kind of
Correct.
area. But the other thing is, when you have this handoff, there's a lot of this work going on now, like the chromium work. Is there a way, or will there be a way, to ensure a smooth transition, and that all the data that's been collected to date and how the groundwater pumping system and all that operates will somehow smoothly transition if you have a new contractor from an old contractor to a new contractor, and you don't run into one of these situations where the people that didn't get the contract, don't hand over the data or don't do a good job of handing over the data and so forth.
We actually have a 3-month transition period planned at the end of the award of the contract. Right now, the schedule to award the contract is by June 30th, 2017. A 90-day transition period starts July 1st and goes through September 30th. On October 1st, the new contractor would be expected to have gotten all of the turnover information, hired all the staff that they want to staff, and be able to go out in the field and perform work. So at that point, we would expect all of those data collections and everything else, which right now are owned and managed through lands, would all be turned over to the new contractor. Now, what we have done to plan for that is we have modified the fiscal year 17 plan on the bridge contract to include a year-long activity to go prepare for it. So we are now standing up a transition team, and there's a new transition manager for lands to manage their efforts. When Doug has a couple of additional resources on our part, we will have a comparable transition manager that will manage it from our side to make sure that the transition plan put together fully meets all those needs. Everything from not just what lands does, but what lands' subcontractors have done and turned in, because technically lands, even though they will still exist as an M&O entity, they will not have contract status for us. So it's going to be much more difficult if we don't get it during the period to try and recover it afterwards. So lands has to go and close out their contracts or subcontracts with those vendors that are currently doing work, get all the material that they have, and make their material available as well as lands' material available for the new contractor. And then we will be reviewing what they've pulled together to determine whether they've did a good job trying to prepare for the transition. Now, the nice thing is the employees that are currently working, huge portion of those are expected to roll over. So the people doing the work will know where all the bodies are buried, they'll know where all the paperwork is, they'll know what's in progress, that we may have to work a little harder to kind of get the information from maybe previous vendors.
Steve and Helica?
I just had a comment. You said that some additional work was completed under the bridge contract, and I was just happy to hear that and wondering what those projects might have been.
In a lot of cases, let me use the upper Los Alamos town site area. We were able to go and accelerate the completion of that work such that the last couple of sites to be cleaned up are no longer outside the contract period. We pulled them in far enough so that we're going to get them done in 17, and then the town sites, there won't be anything left for the new contractor to do. Whereas previously there might have been 2, maybe 3 sites that still had to be remediated. That's the sort of paradigm we have so far. We've got Middle Los Alamos Canyon that's in the same state. We have prioritized cleanups that we did get to do some accelerations. We demolished some slabs and buildings out at Technical Area 21, which was real close. It's right off Trinity Drive. They finished all the slabs in 16, and the original plan was to finish some of the demolitions in 17. So we've done it all early, and now we can accelerate something else to go take its place. So we tried to pull forth and take off this contract what we knew was going to be done, and then those things that were questionable, I left it on. But part of the reconciliation, we call it a day one change. We'll actually identify those paragraphs they don't need to follow up on, and there might be half a dozen things that we strike through. You're welcome.
Gerard.
Dave, this is follow-up to Nona and Steve's questions. What, I may have missed it, but what qualifies a small business? What's the threshold?
I'm not a small business expert, so I'm just going to give you my impression and what they've told me. Generally, there is a size requirement for the business, but depending upon the, I call it a NAC code, and I can't tell you what the NAC codes are, but it's based on the size of the business and what capabilities they have. It's also based on the value, dollar value of the contracted business. And there's a time frame under which you can qualify for it. In a normal world, a small business would be a startup. You'd grow as you got more contracts. You'd still qualify as a small business until you got so large that you're no longer eligible for small business consideration, in which case you'd be delisted, you'd be taken off, and then it's just a flat competition for contracts. The government, federal government, and it's not DOE, the federal government gives a lot of flexibility and a relatively long period of time that once you get your small business certification, you end up keeping it, even if you might have exceeded the threshold for employee size or contract value, it times out on you. So the goal is get big enough, quick enough, so that it doesn't matter whether you're small business listed anymore. Not all businesses operate that way. There are a number of them that want to stay small business. They don't want to have the responsibility, for example, of priming a contract bid. So they will stay a certain size because they feel comfortable managing that amount of work. In which case, at some point, they may be able to go and extend their small business considerations, but if they get too large, then there's a time frame that they can only keep it for so long.
And they're allowed to collaborate with others to form
Yes, absolutely.
consortium?
As a matter of fact, what you do find in the industry, you will have a small business partner with a large business. The small business will provide for the contract management, and I believe it's 51% of the contracted work scope would have to be performed, self-performed by the small, but they've got a large business partner that helps mentor them and actually provide technical resources that maybe they're harder to come by. You know, small businesses don't have necessarily the availability to attract world-class talent across the board. So if you need the national best groundwater sampling expert, you may have to go to a big business to get it, in which case that's part of the arrangement.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
David, a couple of questions.
Sure.
You expect partnering on this contract, I take. Do you have rough estimate of number of proposers you think might be partnering up on this? I mean,
Actually, can't share that with you.
you can't share that? I just wondered if
We have some expectations. It's probably not going to be a couple dozen. I can probably say that safely without crossing any lines. And it's probably going to be more than one. But other than that, I can't share.
Okay. The other thing is, when is the proposal due?
The proposals are all due the Monday before Thanksgiving. We worked real hard to get the RFP out such that it didn't fall the Monday after Thanksgiving, because that would have screwed up all of the contractors' holidays, and we prefer not to upset them right before we get the proposals.
I always love it when you give one right after the holiday, yeah.
Well, it means my holiday's a mess, but their holidays aren't touched,
Okay,
so.
interesting. And the third thing, community involvement, I see you have that as an item H. Is that going to be consideration in all of these? I can't remember, it's H 20-something.
Yeah, the community involvement, there is a requirement, they have to provide a community commitment plan. But right now, the requirement is they have to provide the plan. We are not going to evaluate it as part of the proposal, which was one of the comments that we got back from both the CAB and the Regional Coalition, was they wanted us to go and evaluate and then later on grade them on how well they did. And we as a department are not willing to go that far when it comes to, we're going to grade their environmental cleanup performance and award them some fee. They're supposed to use some of that fee to fulfill some of these community commitments. So if we judge them harshly on how well they did the community commitments, or how well they met the community commitments or didn't meet the community commitments, then we reduce the fee, which means the contractor would then reduce the money proportioned to or allocated to that program. It would almost be a self-defeating type thing. We have other options to go and do, and that's why I say right now it's kind of embedded in the how well does the contractor interface with the stakeholders to accomplish their mission, and some of the same objectives that the community has for stimulating small business growth, contracting outside of the normal community type thing, involving the stakeholders in discussions and things like that. We can look at that softer criteria and still get the results we want without actually making it a hard, here's a commitment, you said you're going to do it, now I'm going to grade you and take off money for it. So we've got other options to get the same results.
But there is a requirement that they submit a plan to you.
There is a requirement that they submit a plan, and we will look at the plan and we will use that as one of the things that contributes to our evaluation of their management practices.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for David? Okay, well, no.
Something you said in your answer to Gerard raised a question for me. You said with the small businesses, there might not be the same world-class expertise in some areas. So is there a trade-off in trying to hire small businesses because, or contract with small businesses because small businesses are nice versus getting the expertise that you might need, and how do you balance that out, or could you clarify?
Part of the criteria that we have to evaluate is the overall organization and key personnel and how they're going to accomplish the technical work that we set out for them, including providing subject matter expertise for various disciplines. The comment about small business, for example, let me use something that we've already experienced. If I'm looking for a nuclear engineer with DOE safety basis experience for the Transuranic Waste Area G, not everybody has that. So small businesses are less likely to do that. However, there are small businesses, for example, that have nuclear operators. I can get operators, but I might not be able to get the guy that manages the safety bases. I may need a larger company that has a broader perspective to find some of these expertises. So that's what I was trying to get to with the answer. It's not uniform. There are small businesses that are niche. They're the only ones that perform certain capabilities, in which case you may have to go to that small business and they may be one of only 2 suppliers in the world. We recognize the difference, but we have to evaluate what the proposals contain in writing in order to figure out whether they've got a good grip on how to meet our needs for cleanup by their technical approach in the proposals. Did I get to your question? Okay.
Thank you, David.